I'm joined now by John Herbst, former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine and senior director for the Eurasia Center at the Atlantic Council. Thanks for joining us, sir. We do appreciate your time.
Happy to be here.
My first question to you, for starters, what does this announcement by Russia signal?
Well, this is one more example of Putin using nuclear weapons to threaten not just Ukraine, but also the West, so that we stop providing Ukraine the weapons to defend itself against Moscow's war crimes of aggression.
And, you know, Putin says, he said over the weekend, this is no different than what the United States has been doing. He says the U.S. has nuclear weapons stored in Europe. What do you make of that? Is that an apples to apples comparison here?
Well, we've long had nuclear weapons in Europe, first to face off against possible Soviet aggression, and then to face off against possible Russian aggression. So this has been there for a long period of time.
And just knowing this now, how would having these weapons at the ready in Belarus, how would that help Moscow, and how will it impact Belarus?
Putin is playing a complex and partly successful psychological game. He has been suggesting, as his military fails in Ukraine, that, in fact, he might use all methods of Russian power, including nuclear weapons, to achieve his aims. And this has, in fact, at times persuaded the Biden administration not to send weapons that Ukraine needs to win this war. Also, this has raised the specter of a nuclear exchange at some point in the future, when the chance of Putin actually using nukes the chances are very, very slight. So this is one more example of him playing this game to bluff us.
Mm-hmm. Were you surprised by this at all? I mean, when this news broke this weekend, it seems like, you know, something he would pull out of his playbook. Maybe you're not surprised. What did you think when it first broke?
There's no surprise at all. It's worth pointing out that, you know, 10 or 11 months ago, when it became clear that Finland and Sweden wanted to join NATO, Putin said, well, this may require a nuclear response. Finland and Sweden are well on the way to becoming members of NATO, and we're not seeing that nuclear response. But again, Putin likes to throw this threat around because he feels it can help him achieve at least certain tactical objectives.
Mm-hmm. And how should, speaking of a response, how should the United States respond to this news? How should NATO respond to it? And is it time for an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council, in your eyes?
Well, I think a meeting of the UN Security Council to discuss Moscow's aggressive foreign policy is wholly warranted. I think the United States should just yawn at this supposed threat, because, again, now it would be treated with the contempt that it deserves.
And is this just a scare tactic, as an advisor to Ukraine's president is suggesting, or is this something more sinister and serious than that?
Again, Putin has projected the image for literally 20 years that if he's ever in trouble, in other words, he's facing foreign policy defeat, he's like a rat in a corner who will lash out. This is an elaborate metaphor designed to intimidate the United States. What he's doing in Belarus is one more example of that. The proper response is to point out that we have nukes too, that, as the retired Russian General Brzezinski said on Russian TV, of course, Russia would not use nukes in Ukraine. It would only use nukes if NATO is in fact threatening Russia itself. We need to understand that and act appropriately.
And Ambassador, one more question for you. I mean, I know you don't have a crystal ball, but how much longer do we see this invasion happen? I mean, is it years before we see Putin back down from this, or what say you on timeline?
It all depends upon Western and especially American policy. I have no doubt that if we give Ukraine, especially the longer range artillery and rockets that it's asking for, the Ukrainians can deliver a crushing blow to Russian forces in the south and make Putin think seriously about a just peace, withdrawing his troops from most, if not all, of Ukraine. But right now, Putin's aim is still to control politically Ukraine, and he thinks he can outlast the West. I think he's wrong, but a stronger policy now would persuade him faster that he cannot achieve his objectives.
Yeah. Ambassador John Herbst, thank you so much for your time, sir. Appreciate you joining us on a Monday. Well,